Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Good, Bad, Spammy, where we dissect real sales emails that we've gotten and we see how we can make them better. Super exciting. I actually have a special guest and a very familiar face from I'm sure a lot of you, Jason Bay. Welcome, Jason.
What's up? Dude, we've been jamming a lot on a content lately, so I'm excited to dig into this email.
Let's
Yeah.
get into it, shall we? We like to start from the top and really work our way down like an email goes, but yeah, what's your feedback here?
So I think context for the audience would be this is an email that was sent directly to Rita, who's in marketing. So I think that role and context is important. So email, there's really three things that like in terms of actions that we want a prospect to take. It's hey, open our email, read the email, and then reply to the email. So if we start with the open piece, typically the thing that is going to drive the open rate the most is the subject line, and then it's that preview text. It's that first line of the email that pops up. So the commentary is funny here. The subject line, and this is a general copywriting best practice around tonality is super important. So Lavender's got a lot of really great data around unsure tones. So when you don't sound assumptive or like a know-it-all, I don't know, Jack, big surprise. People tend to respond a lot better when you don't sound like an idiot
Big surprise, right? Yeah,
or
totally.
insult people. So your competition is leaving you behind. I just cannot imagine any leader or executive like that not being a triggering thing to the point that it doesn't inspire them to take action, it actually inspires them to maybe reach out to your boss to tell you to stop doing it or to unsubscribe. So that's the
Exactly.
first thing that sticks out to me there is it's not like the subject line is too long or anything like that. It's not relevant to the reason why they're reaching out really. It's insulting
Mhm.
and it doesn't look like a subject line you would use if you were emailing someone that you know.
Yes, exactly. That's actually the same way I look at subject lines is how, if someone was a friend of this prospect, how would they do a subject line? And this is far from it. It would be way more casual. It would be shorter. It would be a whole lot of different things. But yeah. And I think the way I always look at subject lines is it's hard to say if it's going to get you more positive results, but how can this help me not get as many negative results? And this one I think can only go in getting you more in that negative route for sure. And also too, the first line that you mentioned, and we've talked about this a lot, is when someone gets that preview of an email, they get the subject line, yes, we all know, but they get that first line too, where Rita has left some really good notes here with you're already a content marketer. So that was kind of a funny line that I thought they didn't really do their research ahead of time and kind of going into that assumptive mode. It's more of like, no duh, like I'm literally in that content marketing side of things.
Yeah. I mean, this if I was sending this email, the subject line, I was just looking at your guys' blog, I would use the title of one of the more recent blog posts or a webinar. You guys just announced that Outlook is now available, right? Like
Hmm.
Outlook integration could be the subject line. Hey, saw the recent post on this. But again, it's know your audience and you're sending an email to someone about a topic that is in their domain expertise.
Yes.
So you just got to be sensitive to that. Okay, so did you know that 82% of marketers are using content marketing? And did you know that 54% of decision makers? I love data, but when you just share a bunch of stats, it could be sort of overwhelming. I think a
Yes.
general rule of thumb is to share an anecdote or some sort of story and then support that story with your data. So 54% of decision makers say they spend at least an hour each week reading thought leadership content. Like the first sentence of this email, if I was to reference a Mixmax article, might be something around, hey, do you know what percentage of your audience is sales leaders looking at your blog content? Research shows that 54% of decision makers spend an hour each week reading content. I'm curious how you're driving eyeballs onto your content from sales development leaders and sales leaders. You could make a claim and then support it with evidence and data, and you engage the emotional and logical part of the brain when you just rattle off a bunch of stats, it just feels so scientific.
Yeah.
Also,
Super
the
scientific.
first the first stat too is just not even helpful. Did you know that 82% of marketers are using content? I mean, like, it's not even insightful. It's not teaching me anything. It's not provocative any kind of way. So if you're going to use data, use it in a way that helps support the claim you're going to make, or at least make sure it's something provocative that's unexpected.
Yeah.
Like, like if I saw one now, if I saw data that subject lines with 20 plus words have the highest open reply, I'm like, oh wow, that's completely the opposite of how I teach it. That's kind of interesting.
Right.
So at least make sure it's provocative.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of interrupts their normal way of thinking, where this one, like the 82%, given it's my realm and where I spend mo all my time focused, this is obvious. But I like the point you brought up is don't give so many percentages or stats or whatever. Like people are already tuned out at this point. Really cling to one and really hit it home. And also, did you notice how many questions they asked in this first one? I think that's like one thing I even fall victim to sometimes is I get so caught up in maybe asking too many questions, even in a call too,
Yeah.
but email, you got to be super careful about it because you can just overcomplicate it and you can't ask so many questions because then it's like, what are you wanting them to answer? What are you wanting them to really hit on? So that was a big one for me that immediately it's like, there's way too much here. Focus on one and you use that as your call to action.
I met my wife Sarah through Tinder. So I did the online dating thing for a little while. This is back in 2015, 2016. And the messaging and like texting kind of game
Yeah.
I was really bad at. And when
Asking
you
too many
text,
questions.
yeah, like just think like when you text someone multiple questions in one text, it doesn't really feel like a back and forth. It feels like you're emailing someone and
Yeah.
it feels like a lot of effort and friction to
Yes.
respond to you. And I want to do the opposite. The goal is to make it to where the prospect has to burn the least amount of mental calories as possible to figure out what your email is about and how to respond to it. So a good rule of thumb is like one question, ideally, and save it for the call to action.
And I love that comparison because it's so true. It's also like you don't want to interrogate them. Like this is kind of
Yeah.
interrogated mode. Like you're just asking a lot. You're trying to sound like you're curious, but it's just a lot of questions you're throwing at them. Keep it easy, low friction. Easy does it. So that was kind of our first wave. So now we're gonna get into the corrections. How can we make this better? Obviously, this is not the perfect, most, amazing 100% guaranteed this is going to get a response, but this is some of our recommendations on how we can make this better and improve on it and touching on a lot of what Jason and I have already touched on. So, starting with the subject line, make it direct but super simple. Do not try to overcomplicate it, and relevance too. So, I thought the first email was really rude. It was kind of really abrupt. Take that out, and then also just really make it simple. And we've touched on this previously, Jason, with just wanting to make it under 5 words. And I thought this one does a pretty good job, really kind of sparking like, what is this email? And then clicking into it to identify what really is taking place.
Yeah. So I think the lesson here for other people is to think about if I was going to position this solution as a way to help small content teams, this is a way that I could segment the accounts that I reach out to. Because what you could do is you could literally reuse this same email across multiple instances of people with small content teams if you like looked at the amount of people on their content marketing team and slightly adjusted the first line. This is how you get when people talk about personalization and scale. That's how you do it is through segmentation of the people that you're reaching out to in the companies. So if I'm them, this is like a pocket. If I have 200 accounts, I'm like, which ones have really small content teams? And this is kind of like the angle for those small content teams that I can do a bunch of that all at once.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, because it touches on it. You're a one person content team pumping out, and then it gets into the problem too immediately of the pain that comes with that. You're tasked with so many different things, which obviously is going to speak to Rita because she literally is one person doing so much for us. So it just does a really good job of really touching on that. But I love the approach you did of the scalability, taking that segmenting approach of going after a lot of smaller teams that you could work smarter, not harder in a way. And then what do you think about the problem pain? I already touched on it, but yeah, I thought that was a really good segue into kind of getting into that observation and compliment, and then getting right into the real big pain that they're helping to solve.
I think this is good. The only thing that I would just for the other folks that are watching this be mindful of is how this problem affects Rita is going to be very different from how this problem affects Cap, your guys' VP of marketing. Like someone that
Totally.
is more senior is going to care a lot more about the outcomes. In the case of marketing, that's going to be are we like driving leads and brand awareness are really the two big things from a marketing standpoint. Whereas a content marketing manager, Rita in this case, who's like in it, like doing the tactical thing, it's going to be a lot about the day-to-day pain of not having enough time for something or having to go through too many different tools. And then we got to chunk up for the executive or the leader who's going to care a lot about the business outcomes. So you really got to think about that when you're talking about the problem and the solution. If you sell a tool and the end user of Mixmax, let's say, is using the templates and sequences and sending them out, they care about a lot different things than the sales leaders and the business owners that want them to drive pipeline and close more deals and expand into other countries, sell more of their products, whatever it might be. So being able to chunk up to those things is super important. So
Yep.
just something to keep in mind for others when you're thinking about how what you see here translates to your situation.
Totally. Yeah. And it really comes down to what we touched on is doing a little bit of that homework ahead of time. The other thing too with this, Jason, if you noticed, Rita took this and she did the revamp of it. Only one stat now. We're not overcomplicating it with numbers, but it also, I like that she added in, dedicating 1 hour a week to such content, getting more leads, because that's the value that they're really driving home with this solution. So I like that really, way they position that and kind of wrapped it up in the end before the CTA.
Love it.
And then obviously too, so the CTA, the call to action is really where you want to wrap up your email. We always talk about this, like you have to have an ending. You can't just talk about some great information and just leave it on a cliffhanger. You got to ask for it, whether it's asking for a meeting or asking for permission to send them more info, whatever it is. So I loved this low friction call to action, but also the one-click capability with Mixmax, interested
It's pretty
in
money.
offloading some of your work. It's different,
Yeah.
it's right. It's not interested in learning more, open to 30 minutes. It's really specific to what they're getting at, but a
Yeah.
really easy call to action too. So yeah, I loved this.
Yeah, I love it too. This is a pretty money feature. It's what I love about Mixmax is again, the idea is to reduce the amount of effort. What's less effort? Having to type out yes or just clicking yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And
So
how you can do that for those that are on, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging, is in your Gmail with Mixmax. It's super easy. The only thing you really have to do here is go to slash backslash, we all know it, and Mixmax is going to bring up all these commands. You do poll, and then it's going to give you the capabilities to write out your call to action. So don't give me too much trouble, everybody, but I'm going to keep it super generic right now. If I can type. Yes, no, leave me alone. Give them 3 options, insert it, you're off to the races. Click send, one click, it's that easy, that slick. So that's literally the dream of how you can make it, not forcing someone to write an email. We all don't like writing emails. So let's just make it one click, and that's what you can add in and make it as nice as Rita's version here with your call to action in your emails.
yeah, I wasn't even thinking about this too. The bump emails and the follow-up emails, just throwing a poll into there instead of saying any thoughts or
Oh my
bumping
gosh.
something, you could bump it with a poll. I'll have to
Yeah.
try that actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the infamous, thoughts question mark.
Yeah.
Make it a little different. It makes Max can help with that for sure. Well, cool. Jason, anything else you want to add before we wrap up here?
I would say lastly, the framework that you see in play here is the most important takeaway from this. I was just doing, God, in the last couple weeks, I've done cold email webinars with like 3 or 4 different people. And what was really funny, including you guys, is that all of us are generally following the same principles and we're using different words and phrasing and all that kind of stuff. But it starts with an observation that's relevant, segueing into a problem, talking about some sort of social proof or solution and how you help, and then having some sort of call to action. Like that's really like the age old formula for marketing, selling, etc. is like something contextual about you, a before state, aka problem, an after state, solution, and then a call to action, some sort of ask on what you want the person to do if they're interested. So it's following that basic age old formula, and that's what you want to do with your emails.
It's so crazy that as much as sales has changed and the outbound game has changed, that is still the same framework that works and it will continue to work. I think it's just a matter of keeping true to don't complicate the email, but use that same framework. Just follow that observation, compliment, problem, pain, solution, ask.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Jason, thanks for your time. Everyone who joined, appreciate y'all. Let us know in the comments below if you have any other recommendations. We would love to hear from y'all what you would do differently. If there's something you don't agree, anything is fair game. Let us know. But Jason, appreciate the time, and I guess we'll see you next time when we do it again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.